In a world full of voices, blocking out the noise is vital. The Bible is clear that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Therefore, this show is dedicated to providing you with a clear sound of the Scriptures, which are inspired by the Spirit of God and passed down by apostles and prophets. I am your host, delivering the heat, Gerald Joseph, a preacher and avid student of the Word, and you are now listening to the Holy Fuel Podcast. Welcome once again. As is our custom, you will be hearing this on Monday morning, and I just want to say a few things before I get into today's episode. Now, I don't expect this episode to be long, but I want to give an update on the podcast and where we are right now. See, we have been journeying through Joshua, and so I think it was Light Has Dawned was kind of the frame of mind I was working on when I first began the podcast right after the Catalyst, which was episode 1, and we went through a journey of I forget how many episodes it was, but we did a few episodes and we began, let me think. We began with Isaiah chapter 7, if I'm not crazy. And we were talking about Ahaz. We were talking about, the sign that he requested, or sign he didn't request, I should say. And his, trying to be pious, but really wasn't. We had unholy alliances. We had one of the most played episodes on the podcast, Shiloah. We had all these episodes, and I really, really enjoyed that. And now we are going through our journey through Joshua, and we've come up to an interesting place in Joshua, and we are going to continue our journey through Joshua in this episode. However, I want to give a news update. As I had said when the year had began, the year 2024, we had been working on a few things. We'd been working on getting some merch available. We'd been working on a bit of a secret in the background, but now I'm going to spill the beans. It is official now, where we have a website. So we have literally just kind of designed this website. We've been working on this for a little while, and finally I found the time to invest into it, and so we did. And so now, what's the point of the website? Well, it's about the merch. We finally have merch available, and the website for the Holy Fuel Podcast is, you probably guessed it, holyfuelpodcast.com. So take some time, visit the site, and find your merch on the Holy Fuel Podcast. I'm really excited. I even ordered some for myself. So I'm looking forward to see, where this goes. So thank you for everyone who's tuned in to the podcast. Thank you for the faithful listeners. And because of you, we've done this. And so I'm looking forward to adding more as time goes on. I'm looking forward to doing more with the website. Actually, something that I am absolutely considering is adding some resources to the website. And so keep poking your head in, because at some point it'll be there. And really, as stated before, the purpose of this is that I want to provide you with holy fuel, and holy fuel is simply the Word of God. The Word of God is going to be the catalyst to living a life of holiness and a life that is pleasing to God. And so really, that's the purpose of this podcast. It's to be a help to everyone who listens. It's to be a witness in a dark world, in this world full of voices. I want you to get the word of God in your airwaves. And that's all that I'm doing here. I'm taking myself out of the way. I don't know if we'll do video podcasts in the future, but it's something to consider. But as of now, we're just on every podcasting platform minus YouTube. So we'll see what the future holds. We'll see if we can get to that place. And if we can, I think we'll gain a little more listeners. I do believe that there are some people that do not listen to podcasts. And just so you know, that's okay. Totally understandable. But for those who do, this is for you. And this is my thank you to your faithfulness to hearing what this crazy dude has to say. So thank you for tuning in. I'm very excited. Remember, there's merch on the website. The website is www.holyfuelpodcast.com. So go on, check it out, find your merch, and leave us a review on Apple. Let us know what you think of the podcast, and listen, I'm eager to hear from you. So thank you, and let's get into this episode, because I think this is interesting. I think this is a very important episode because it's often certain things that we don't think about. So as we continue in Joshua, we went through Joshua chapter 11 the last time, the war that wages on. And today, I'll just give you the title. The title of this episode is When God Says Enough. Okay? So what we're going to do in this episode is we're not going to read Joshua chapter 12, because Joshua chapter 12 is a recap of the kings that Moses conquered on the east side of the Jordan and the kings that Joshua conquered on the west side of the Jordan. So we're not going to read Joshua chapter 12, but in your spare time and when you find a moment, you should read it and realize how, there is just this great conquest that happens. However, I do want to read the first 6 verses of Joshua chapter 13. So we'll begin. I read from the New King James Version, just in case you're wondering. And so Joshua chapter 13, beginning with verse number 1, and it reads like this. Now Joshua was old, advanced in years, and the Lord said to him, You are old, advanced in years, and there remains very much land yet to be possessed. This is the land that yet remains, all the territory of the Philistines and all that of the Geshurites, from Seir, which is east of Egypt, as far as the border of Ekron, northward, which is counted as Canaanite, the 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazites, the Ashdodites, the Ashkelonites, the Gittites, and the Ekronites, as also the Avites. From the south, all the land of the Canaanites, and Mira, that belongs to the Sidonians, as far as Aphek, to the border of the Amorites, the land of the Gebalites, and all Lebanon toward the sunrise, from Baal Gad below Mount Hermon, as far as the entrance to Hamath, all the inhabitants of the mountains from Lebanon as far as the brook Misrephoth, and all the Sidonians. Them I will drive out from before the children of Israel, only divide it by lot to Israel as an inheritance, as I have commanded you. And so, in this episode, as stated, I want to talk about when God says enough. And I want to talk about this because I think this is so vitally important in every way, shape, and form. whether it be spiritual of nature or whether it just be your profession, your secular profession. There's something to be seen here. And the reality is that it was the Lord who reminds Joshua that he's old. Now, I don't know about you, but I have seen many elders and I have seen how they interact with work. And what's always fascinating is their dedication, regardless of their age, regardless of everything going on. There is always a continued dedication to whatever work is before them. However, I'm going to say this one more time. The Lord said to Joshua, "You are old, advanced in years, and there remains very much land yet to be possessed." And so, this begs to get into this, because the reality that we find in this is that Joshua is being instructed by God, even though there remains yet land to be conquered. Joshua is told by God, it's enough. And now it's time to divide the land. It's time to give the land as an inheritance to the people. And it's going to be so important that Joshua follows what God tells him. See, that's one of the hardest things to deal with, whether in ministry or profession. And that thing is when God says that it is time to hang up the boots, when God says enough. And it is one of the most difficult things that many elders will wrestle with, because what usually tends to happen is that whenever we find ourselves fulfilling a role or a position, whether it's in a church, whether it's in an organization, whether it's in your workplace, we tend to hold on to it with a death grip. And one of the most dangerous things that can happen is that in our hold to a position or a role, we find that we're no longer effective. We find that the juice has worn off. We find that time has gotten to us. And one of the most mature things that you're going to have to do is hang up the boots. You see, if you know me, you know I love soccer. It's actually so weird how this happened, because me and my brother used to play this video game, and then I kind of got hooked on the sport. And I remember it was around the time when there was this young star that was rising up. And from the get, I was like, this is going to be a phenomenal player. And so what's so interesting is that everyone knows my favorite soccer team is Manchester United. Around 2003, I do believe, they signed on a young player, and his name was Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, here's what's so epic about this guy. This guy was pretty much a crybaby. My brother would laugh. My brother absolutely loves Leo Messi, and he loves the teams of Brazil and Argentina, but Argentina was always his favorite team. But the reality is this, is that I always loved this guy named Cristiano Ronaldo. I thought he was an extraordinary player. I thought the sky was going to be the limit for this guy. And what's so interesting is that his career has stood the test of time. You see, he has won all the accolades. He has achieved so many things. But here's the hardest choice that he clearly hasn't made. You see, you have the ability to end your career with a legacy of being one of the GOATs, one of the greatest to ever touch the soccer ball. But here's the problem, because age is something that respects no one. You see, everyone that reaches to the ages of 36 and over is going to experience a dip in performance, is going to experience a dip in what they used to be able to do. They're going to experience that loss of strength. They're going to experience all these things. And it actually does not matter how much you work. Time catches up to everyone and respects no one. There is nothing you can do to reverse what time is going to do to you. And here's the hardest thing for a soccer player of the echelon of Cristiano Ronaldo is he never wants to give up. He never wants to hang up the boots. And here's the reality. He's played for Manchester United. He's played for Real Madrid. He has set records for Real Madrid. He's played for Juventus. And all the while, he has this thing in his mind where he wants to keep on playing. He wants to keep on kicking this ball for the love of the game. Yet, time has caught up to him. And you have to be careful because your relationship with the work or the profession is going to consume you and it's going to destroy you, because the thing that you want to hold on to is the thing that God is saying it's time to hang up the boots. We have to realize that regardless of where we are, where God has placed us, that there is coming a time when God says enough. And notice Joshua, even with all this land remaining to be conquered, God said enough. CR7, still my favorite player, but I don't follow any team that he plays for now because now he has had a dip in performance. He went back to Manchester United, and then after that there was a huge fallout. The thing is, you're not the player you used to be, and you have a decision to make. The decision is you can hang up the boots and end your career with a legacy that's probably never going to be mimicked, or you can keep on playing and destroy the legacy that you have as a phenomenal player because you didn't realize when it was time to hang up the boots. And that's the reality. The reality is that time is not going to respect anyone, and it's going to take someone who is wise enough to realize that they cannot continue on in whatever role or position or work they're doing forever. And they have to consider and realize there's going to be a time when God says enough. You see, and it's something that we often don't like because we want to hold on to everything, but we have to make sure that we have a healthy relationship with positions, a healthy relationship with roles, a healthy relationship with things, and realize that we cannot do it all. You see, Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. They crossed through the Red Sea. They provoked God to anger, and so they died in the wilderness. And Moses, because he struck the rock when God said to speak to it, the Lord promised him, listen, you will see the land, but you will not step foot in it. And it was giving limits to someone, because the reality is everyone has limits. No matter how great you are, no matter how great a legacy you have, every single individual has limits, and you're going to need to have a healthy relationship with wherever God has you at the moment, because the moment will have an ending and you will have to hang up the boots. Moses died at the ripe age of 120. God forbid I live that long. But here's the reality. because after Moses had conquered Og of Bashan and Sihon, the king of the Amorites, after Moses had conquered those two, God said, enough. And after God said enough, after Moses had died, the beautiful thing here is that there was a young man who got up early and stayed late, kind of like CR7's career when it comes to training. You see, he worked harder than everyone else. And so there was a young man by the name of Joshua that stayed in the tabernacle whenever Moses spoke to the Lord. And the Lord found that he could raise up this young man. And Moses was wise enough to realize that I need to raise up this young man from the next generation, because something that Moses understood was there's going to be a time to hang up the boots. There's going to be a time when I can do no more. There's going to be a time when God says enough. And that time happened, and the Lord spoke to Joshua and said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, arise, go. And so we find how Joshua is commissioned by the Lord. He is given everything he needs in Joshua chapter 1, that the word should tarry in his heart so that his way could be successful. And then it's almost like you got to realize there's a shift in Israel's history, because Joshua was a servant like Moses, but do you realize the problem here? Let me remind you, because now Joshua is old, and God says it's enough. We see all the kings that Joshua has conquered, 31 in total. He has more than quadrupled Moses' performance with defeating the kings of the land. He has conquered, but yet there is still remaining territories to be conquered. But here's the problem. Because there is not another individual to be risen up in place of Joshua. This is where Israel's history takes this crazy turn, because God promises to drive all of these remaining territories, the people, out. But the problem is that there is not a candidate for God to use to drive them out. And so these remaining territories become a thorn in Israel's side. And I'm telling you, we have to have enough wisdom to understand that we cannot do it all, that no matter how good we do, there's still going to be more that needs to be done. So we have to be careful, and we have to consider not to consolidate all the power and charisma to ourselves, but we need to spread the wealth. Listen, it's dangerous to have an unhealthy relationship with roles and positions, because we become short-sighted and never realize that the future holds a time where we're going to have to hang up the boots. And if we're not careful, the legacy will die with us. And that's the reality. Something that I've learned from my pastor's wife is such a profound concept. And she says this: you need to always be working yourself out of a position. And that's the only way that the kingdom sees forward progress. That's the only way that you can get this conquest of Moses and get this crazy conquest of Joshua. That's the only way the work continues. It continues when you realize that you're not going to be where you are forever, and you take the necessary time and steps to invest in the future. And that's going to be so important for pastors. It's going to be so important for people in ministerial positions. It's going to be so important because we have to be careful not to consolidate everything to ourselves. And we have to realize at the end of the day, whether we are men of God, women of God, whether we are men or women of the corporate world, at the end of the day, we are just men and women, and that means we are subject to time. We are subject to being worn out. We are subject to coming to a place where it has to stop. And we've got to be careful not to think that we can somehow hold on to everything that God has done with us in our prime. Because the reality is, you will not always be in your prime. There's going to come a time when God says, stop, and it's going to take maturity for you not to hold on to the power. You see, we must actively invest in the future. And the problem that we have is that after Joshua, I'm going to give you a hint. I did read the entire Bible at some point. And what happens after Joshua is what we call Judges. And the problem with Judges is that the people of God now begin to waver back and forth, and it's always a particular time where God has to raise up a judge to rule. You see, God will have to, when God raises someone up, you have to realize this. It's about who's a willing vessel. It's about who will go. But the reason God has to raise someone up is because we have not actively taken the time to invest in the people right in front of us. Because if we would invest in the future and acknowledge that there's coming a time when God says enough, the land can be conquered. But because there is no one that is raised up after Joshua to be a prophet or servant like Joshua in this case, the problem will be that these unconquered territories will always be a thorn in Israel's side. This is why we get the story of the Philistine that comes against Israel. Why? Because Joshua did not continue the cycle of investing in the next generation. He did not continue, just like Moses discipled Joshua. There's no one to continue so that these lands can be conquered. Because here's the thing, God works with human partners. But if there's no human partners, they tend to have great victories. Then they tend to fall off. It's like Gideon. He had the great victory, but then he falls into idolatry. You see, this goes for our new covenant as well, because Jesus said, make disciples, not converts. And we have to be careful, because sometimes we think that a convert is going to do amazing things and stick it out. But the reality is this, is that if a convert is not discipled, they will fail. They'll have one nice rise at best. But the reality is that disciples are the ones who carry this to the ends of the world. Disciples are the ones who make another disciple to fill in their place. We have to be careful not to be short-sighted, and we need to invest in the future. We need to invest in young people. We need to invest in people that will be able to fill our place, because the reality is there's coming a time when God says enough. And the reality is, if we are honest with ourselves, we will not conquer everything that we've set out to conquer. And the reality is that's okay, as long as you are investing in the generation that's rising up. It is vital to invest in the future, because there's coming a time when God sits you down. So we have to be careful. We have to make sure that we have a healthy relationship with positions, roles, and the work that we do. We have to make sure that we're making a conscious investment in the future, because there's a peril of failing to do so. And that peril is what we see countless times in this Bible. We see the peril with Eli. Eli, his sons are wicked. And Eli loses his sight. He loses his ability to govern the people of God. But thank God that there was Samuel. However, who rose up after Samuel? God had to raise up prophets to confront the kings of Israel. You see, we play an active role, and we have to have the wisdom to invest in the future. If we're going to continue striving ahead, if we're going to continue with a consistent work that's being done wherever we are, we have to make sure that we're investing in the future. And I just want to ask you this question in this episode. Are you actively investing in your replacement? Or are you consolidating power and charisma to yourself? Because if we want the work to continue, if we want the remaining territories to be subdued, if we want the inhabitants of the land to be driven out, we're going to have to actively invest in the future. You see, Paul the apostle was the apostle to the Gentiles, but yet there's something so profound and so breathtaking in the New Testament. And there are these letters, the letters to Timothy, the letter to Titus. Paul actively invests in the future. Why? Because he knows there's coming a time when God says enough. And I'm just dropping this episode so we can take it into consideration and realize whether we are men or women of God, we are still men and women. We are still subject to time. And if we're going to make active investments, we must do so consciously, because we all have to face the music that there's coming a time when God says enough. You see, Paul told Timothy, he said, stir up the gift that is within you by the laying on of my hands. Stir it up. Don't let it die. There's this active investment in the future, and pastors and ministers would be wise to invest in the future, and they should begin investing in the future today. Because we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know when God says it's time to stop. But we have to realize that the time is coming. And if we're not actively investing in the future, we set up future generations for failure. We set up future generations for being cyclical, just like Samson. His name means like the sun. He wavered. We set up the future of the work that God has done in and through us to be stifled because we failed to make active investments today. I'm telling you, these things have consequences. And a lot of times we fail to see the consequences because we're so short-sighted. Man, this reminds me of Hezekiah. Because Hezekiah was a righteous king. Hezekiah was a good guy. But yet, when he sought for more years on his life, and the Lord fulfilled that, the end of his life was a mess. And he set up future generations for failure. This is why the captivity happened. This is why Babylon was able to pillage the children of Israel. This is why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel were carried away to Babylon. This is why there were generations of people, young men of the highest order from Israel, that ate the king's meat, that subjected themselves. Why? Because Hezekiah decided that he was going to show the enemy the furniture of God's house. We have to be careful with how we live today and what we do today, because what we do today has a great effect on tomorrow. Because there's coming a time when God says enough. And we have to remember, regardless of what we might think, this is not just about me. This is not just about you. This is not about you building your empire or kingdom. No, we must give room to the next generation. You have to realize you cannot do it all. And so I just want to make this a quick reminder, and I want to say, invest in the future. Invest in young people. Invest in those who will be able to stand up when God says it's enough. Invest in tomorrow, because the reality is that we keep this going if we are actively investing in the future of the church of the living God. And that's going to be vital, because Paul invested in Timothy. Paul invested in these young men. What Paul said was, be diligent to show yourself approved, a workman that need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. We need to realize that we don't have all the answers, and we need to train up young men and young women who will be able to carry the torch on. But if we fail to, we set up the future of the church for failure. See, Paul gave Timothy all the tools he would need, because one thing Paul understood is that there's coming a time when God says enough. You know what? I want to close in the scripture, because you have to understand, if we will be wise and have a healthy relationship with the work that we do and invest in the future, we can make sure that the work and the labor or the foundations that we've laid are not laid in vain, and we can be confident that the torch will be carried on, and we can go to our own rest and join voices with the Apostle Paul. And here's what he says. He says, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing." And so I say this to you. There's coming a time when God says enough. So let's have a healthy relationship with our role and our work, and let's invest in the future so that the torch can be carried on and the remainder of the land could be conquered. So with that, I say God bless you. We love you. And peace.